Alex Alexander here, CEO of Accelerationdb. I have decided to record a video on MySQL MHA. I published a number of blogs on the subject, but then myself viewing some other videos of various technologies, I realized that videos are very interactive and it's very easy to view the various commands, and they provide very good delivery on the subject matter. So we'll be speaking about MySQL MHA. And what MySQL MHA stands for is basically MySQL High Availability. This tool is recently came on the scene. It allows you to configure your master and slave database or master-master databases in a monitoring fashion. So MHA will monitor your entire configuration. So in case one of your primary database fails, MHA will perform the automated failover to the standby database, and it will also relocate your slaves from your primary database to your secondary database. So very interesting tool developed in Perl. It's developed by Yoshinori, and there's his blog. You can see right here. The tool is completely open source, and this is a URL where it can be downloaded from. I also built a diagram here to easily explain how the MHA is working. So this diagram will help you to be guided through how this configuration is actually working. So what do we have here? We have, this is your application, and it could be any of your application, any of your customer-facing applications and so forth. And what we have down here, we have your typical MySQL replication configuration, plus we additionally have the MHA manager node. So we have MySQL master database, secondary master database, and we have two MySQL slave databases. As you can tell here, I have two masters configured in master-master format, and I have two slave databases also attached to my primary master. I also have the additional node here. It's the MHA manager node. So basically every MHA configuration needs the MHA manager node. So this is the node that performs the monitoring of all your databases. And when your specific database is out, MHA manager will detect the outage and will relocate those two slaves from your primary database to your secondary database over here. Now the question you're probably asking, and what happens when my application is connected to my primary database? Well, the application is connected using virtual IP. That's what the VIP stands for. So it basically, it's not a VIP lounge, it's a virtual IP. And when your primary database will fail, MHA management node would automatically take that virtual IP and relocate to your secondary standby master. So this is a virtual IP for it. It's going to be moved between two of those nodes. So typical MySQL configuration, once again, with two master databases and two slave databases. This is acting also as a slave database right now. So basically you can read from any one of those three nodes. MySQL management node can be very small because it actually doesn't house any databases. It's only housing the MHA components, and that's all it is to it. So this is your configuration, how MHA is initially configured. Now with that, we'll go to the failover and what happens during the database outage. So here what we have your application again, and you can see with this lines crossed, so your master database failed. And you see what happened, MHA relocated the virtual IP to your standby master database. And if you notice, the replication also relocated to the secondary standby master database. Like if you remember in our original configuration, the slaves were pointed to this database here. And when the outage happened, when your database, for some reason, something happened, data block corruption, it just shut down for some reason, someone by accident pushed the power off. But that's what's going to happen. Basically, the virtual IP would go to the secondary database, and the slaves, most importantly, will be automatically relocated and be in sync with this database here. Now, what happens when this master comes back online? So in that case scenario, let's say you recover the database in this case. So what you're going to do, basically, you're going to reestablish the replication. Let's quickly. So once it's back online, what you're going to do, you're going to reestablish the replication and so forth. So when you reestablish the replication, you fix the issues and things like that, now you're running on your actually secondary master. And if your secondary master fails, it will repeat itself. You'll still have the relocation of VIP, and the slaves would be relocated back to the original master. There you go. And this replication component will go away. Very simple configuration, works very well, and it's very easy to understand it schematically. Those green lines, what I have here, there's actually no data travel going on between the nodes, but what's happening here is that what I wanted to demonstrate, that MHA Manager is monitoring all of your nodes in this configuration. I'll use an opportunity and briefly speak about my company, Accelerationdb. So what we specialize in open source databases consulting, such as MySQL and Postgres. We consult in various flavors of MySQL, not only MySQL but also MariaDB, Drizzle, various MySQL distributions. We provide MySQL training, particularly MySQL cluster training, MySQL DRBD training, MySQL Tungsten training, and MySQL MHA training. If you noticed from those subjects, those are MySQL high availability tools, so they will provide training for those. Also, we provide MySQL consulting, like I mentioned, and of course, MySQL remote DBA services. Practically what we do, we log in and remotely manage your databases. We provide remote DBA services, like I mentioned, for most of the MySQL releases and also for Postgres and SQL. So with that, we'll jump to actual viewing how MHA is working, and basically we'll see the MHA is in action. So just like in the diagram that I showed before, here's the diagram. So we have several MySQL nodes configured. So we have master database, we have MySQL slave, and we have the MHA management node. And this is actual configuration in action. So I have 3 databases here. I have DB04, DB05, DB06, and this node here, DB07, it's actually not a database node, it's an MHA management node. This is a node that I was referring to in my diagram right here. So there is no data stored on this node specifically. That all that node does is just monitoring my existing configuration that I have in place and performs master-slave relocation. If my primary database fails, it will relocate the slaves to my standby secondary database. I can also perform the switchovers using the MHA. So I can also perform a planned switchover. By failover, I mean failover is unplanned outage when your master database shut down for some reason. And a switchover, of course, is a planned outage when you, for example, you'd like to upgrade one of your databases. For example, I'd like to upgrade my database here, and I'd like to switch over to the standby master database. That's what the planned failover and switchover stands for. So I have, like I mentioned, I have 4 nodes here. I have 3 nodes here, 2 master databases and single slave database. Those 2 configured in master format. You see this master pointing to DB05, DB04 pointing to DB05, and DB05 pointing to DB04. And my slave database is pointing to my primary master database, which is DB05 at the moment. So I just check the replication status and so forth. And then I have here is this node right here is MHA management node. That node performs the entire administration. Quickly, I'll jump to the installation components, what actually goes into it to install MHA. On each MySQL node, what you're installing MHA node components. That's all it is to it. So it's a single RPM file. It goes on each MySQL node. And that's all it is to it. The interesting thing is that there is no configuration needed on each MySQL node. You actually don't have to do anything besides installing the node components itself. So you just perform the RPM installation, and what it'll do, it will install the MySQL node components, and no configuration is required on MySQL servers whatsoever. And what you have here is a management node. And on the management node, you install the node components, same as each MySQL node has. And you also install MHA manager component. So actually, this is the RPM file itself. There you go. So on the management node, you install the node components and you install the MHA management component. So the entire configuration is actually stored on your MHA manager node right here. So there's no configuration required on each individual MySQL servers. And the configuration files, you technically can store the configuration files in any directory because it's all controlled by the configuration, central configuration file anyway. But in my case, I usually do it, I put them in etc MHA, so that's why I locate all the files. And every MHA configuration has a default file right here. Has a default file. And what does default file stands for? So it stores your default components, such as your user for MHA, user for MySQL database. So this is MySQL database user. Your user for MHA specifically configuration. I have also, it also stores your replication user and replication password, points to working directory of your MHA configuration, points to your log directory, and remote working directory stands for the directory on those nodes, on MySQL nodes here. And you have to provide the bin log location directory. MHA has to have access to your relay logs and your bin logs, because this is how it performs the relocation of your slave database from the primary master database here to the secondary master database here. So it needs to know where the bin logs are located. Also, the MHA node here must have access, SSH access to all the nodes in the configuration. And the second configuration file is also very simple. It's actually listing all your nodes. So I have server 1, server 2, and server 3. So as I mentioned, I have 3 MySQL nodes in my configuration, and this is how you list it out. For example, in my case, DB04, DB05, and DB06 are members to my replication, MHA replication configuration. Now, if you notice, DB04 and DB05 have different parameters than server 3. Why is that? And the reason is that those two nodes, DB04 and DB05, are configured in master-master format. And I'll explain further down the road why that's so. But if you notice, there's two parameters, such as candidate master parameter right here. They both have the candidate master parameter and check replication delay set to 0. So basically what I'm instructing MHA to do is if one of the nodes fails, the candidate master instructs MHA to fail over on that node. And under no circumstances I'm instructing MHA to fail over my slave databases. Why is that so? Well, typically in master-slave configuration, I have one very, let me take a peek at the diagram here that I have. Typically what you have, your master databases, in many cases are a lot more powerful, have more capacity, because the master databases receive the write transactions, in many cases read and write transactions. But the slave databases are usually configured for read-only transactions. And so that could be, they could have different configuration. So in that case, by providing 2 dedicated masters, you're basically instructing MHA not to fail over in your slave databases. You don't have to. For example, if you have identical slaves, you don't have to use master-master configuration, because MHA will relocate your application to the least behind slave. So the slave that is most current in the configuration, that's where MHA would go. So, well, like I mentioned, 2 configuration files control the entire MHA configuration. Very straight and very simple. Now you would ask how this entire thing is working. Well, the way it's working is that master has this configuration stored on central management node, and then it logs on to your MySQL nodes and performs the failover and so forth. So it must have access, not only SSH access to those nodes, but it also must have access to MySQL databases themselves. Where the files are located, they're located in user bin. Those are the executables, master HA. It's a command line tool. So for you to power up the MySQL MHA or to perform the monitoring, basically all you use those command line tools. You execute the command line tools. What I've done to make it simpler, I wrote a small menu called MHA. This menu allows me not to memorize every single command, so I just created a menu to make it easier. You don't have to use the menu, but let's quickly take a look at this. I'll show you. It's actually a very simple shell script. Show you how the thing works, but I noticed it actually makes it a lot easier. See, there you go. This is how the menu works itself, and what it does, it calls various, depending on your selection, it calls various MHA commands. And I also provide the command, and I do echo which command is going to be executed. So what's that? So assuming you configured MySQL replication, and like I mentioned, it doesn't have to be master-master, it could be all master-slave replication in that case. Assuming you configure the replication, the first thing you're going to perform, and you install your MHA management tool, you're going to check the SSH access. So what basically you're trying to check if the MHA manager node right here has the SSH access to all your SQL nodes. So with that, we run this command, and there you go. So MHA comes up and you see it reports to you that's okay, it can connect to all the nodes. So this has to come up with okay messages that it's all working fine. So, and the second thing you need to check if your MySQL replication, basically MHA once again, this time is going to log into each SQL node and check the replication topology to make sure that user ID and passwords are working and so forth, and there you go. So with that, we'll check on MySQL replication. So it's going to perform series of checks. And there you go. So it came back and reported that MySQL replication health is okay. That means the replication is configured correctly. And also printed out the replication topology. It tells you see DB05 is current master, and you have DB04 and DB06 databases. So very straightforward. Now we can take a look at this, what it actually does. Because I run the selection 4 to check on the replication. Actually, it's a selection 2. And this is a command that MHA actually performs. So we can also run it from command line. You see, this is a command, and what you do, master HA check REPL, check replication, and if you notice, you're pointing to the configuration file, that lists your nodes. So there you go. If I run this command without using my menu, it will produce the same results practically. And as I mentioned, I didn't want to memorize all the commands, so that's why I brought that menu here, so it makes it a lot easier. So with that, we'll call my MHA manager again. What other options I have? So I can check the MHA manager status. That allows me to see if my MHA manager is not running. So right now, MHA manager is not running. Basically what it does, it's not monitoring my nodes at this point. And that means I'm not running, basically what it means, I'm running in a manual mode. That's all it is to it. And we'll take a look at the command itself. And this is option 3. There you go. That's the command that MHA is running, that you need to run. You see user bin master HA check status. And once again, every command that you run, it's always pointing to your configuration file. As simple as that. There you go. See, it tells me that it's not running. So with that, I'll recall my menu again. What else I can do from here? I can basically start my MHA manager or stop MHA manager. When I press, let's say, select 5, and you see this is a command is running. It's powering up the MHA manager to run in background. And I can check on the MHA manager status again, and you can see my MHA manager is running now. Now what I did basically, now my MHA manager component is running on this node, and it's monitoring all of those databases members of my cluster. Very simple. And once again, I do number 3. There you go, ping OK. And we'll take a look what number 3 does. This is a command to check on the status. And my selection, my next selection 4, this is a command to stop MHA manager. Very simple actually. So we'll just, there you go. So if I'd like to stop, well, I say master HA stop, and once again, like I mentioned, everything points to a configuration file. There you go. Stopped successfully. With that, I can recall my menu and check on the status. And if you see, you can see here, it's not running. So I just stopped my MHA manager. Now the question is, you might ask, why would I need to do so? Well, maybe I need to perform a manual switchover. So because, we'll check my replication right now. And you can see that, let me scroll up a little bit, the DB05 is my current master. So let's say I'd like to perform some maintenance on DB05 database here, and I'd like to switch to DB04 node. So with that, I actually created this command called switch, and I'll show you how it works. So I'll go to switch, and it's going to run through a series of confirmation steps. So I'm just confirming that I'd like to switch it. And you see my current master is DB05, and my new master is going to be DB04. Let's confirm this on our slave database. So show slave database points to DB05 right here. So after I run this command, this slave would be repointed from DB05 to DB04. Simple as that. And it's fully automated. Confirm once again. And so MHA is running now a series of commands, and it just relocated my slave to the new master. As you remember this, it used to point to DB05, so we're going to show slave status again. And guess what? Now it's pointing to DB04. So what MHA did is basically perform this switch. So I did a planned switchover for DB05 maintenance, and I relocated my slave database to DB04. Now if I go back to my menu, and I'd like to check on MySQL replication, it'll print me the new topology. Let's take a look. Look, there you go. DB04 shows as a current master, and DB05 and DB06 are shown as the slaves. So basically MHA does, it transitions the roles. The good thing is that you don't have to do it manually. Before, what you needed to do, before MHA, you had to log in to each slave and execute the change master statements and so forth. What MHA does for you, it does it for you automatically. So, and hence the capabilities you must have to stop the MHA before you're performing the switchover. So you power down the MHA manager that runs in background and monitors the databases, and you perform the planned switchover. So it has this capability. It's actually very seamless, and I tested it on a number of occasions, works really well. And what also it does, it performs the checking of your bin logs and your relay logs and performs the entire relocation. So it's a very useful tool. So we looked how MHA works in a manual mode. So when we want to switch off from your primary database to your secondary database, what we were doing basically, we were performing a planned switchover. Let's say we were performing the maintenance and so forth. So the next step we're going to look at MHA automated capabilities to monitor your databases nodes, and perform an automated failover from your primary database to your secondary database. So with that, let's take a look at our existing configuration. It will print us the replication topology. So if you look here, DB04 is our current master database, DB05 is standby master, and DB06 is our slave database. We can also take a look at DB06 here and show slave status. It points to DB04 as a primary database. And right now, if we take a look, the MHA manager is not running. So basically it is not monitoring our databases. With that, we're going to start our MHA manager. And we'll check on the status to make sure it started. See, right now it's initializing. It goes through initializing phase. So we'll check on it again. And there you go. So our main MHA manager is started and it's running in background. Being okay. And it's monitoring our DB04 here, primary master database. The slave is pointing to DB04. To DB04. And the MHA manager is running. So we can also check. And there you go. You see the MHA manager is running in background. And like I mentioned, MHA is a collection of Perl scripts. So MHA manager is basically a Perl script that performs your entire monitoring and it runs in background. So with that, we're going to simulate the master database outage. So what should happen during this, my slave databases, or database, in my case I have only one database, would be relocated from DB04 to DB05. So let's simulate the outage. We're just going to basically shut down MySQL. Stop. So what should happen at this phase, this slave database that's pointing to DB04 should be automated and repointed to my new master DB05. So let's check slave status. Look at that. My slave database now completely repointed to my new master database DB05. And then that happened completely automatically. So no interaction is needed for you. And what also it does, it relocates the virtual IP from DB04 to DB05. So basically, that doesn't require any interaction on your side for this to happen. So it's automatically relocated your application from previous master DB04 to the new master DB05 with no manual interaction. That is actually pretty cool. So I was very impressed with this tool when I saw it. So I was very impressed with it for this automated failover capability and manual switchover capability. So I can recall my MHA manager again, check on the replication. And that's what it tells me, is that because there's a failure was previously, so MHA performed the failover. And if I check on my MHA manager status, it's not running. So what MHA does, it performs the failover and shuts down. And it makes sense because it just fulfilled its mission. So MHA manager fulfilled its mission. It's shut down my primary database and failed over my slaves to my standby database. It doesn't matter how many slaves you have. You can have one slave or you can have 50. It'll do the same thing for all of them. So all of your slaves will be relocated to your secondary standby database. And if you can see var log, I also have my MHA management log. That's various statuses that I was checking before, actually. And that's where it locates in var log. And if you look at this configuration, the messages, I configured it to go to var log directory. And that's pretty much how it works. You know, it's a fairly simple tool to install and configure. Doesn't require a lot. With that, I'm going to cover one more subject. It's look at MHA directories one more time. And if you notice, like I mentioned, I have two configuration files that perform this entire configuration. And I also have a scripts directory. And this master LP online change script. This is the script that actually performs the virtual IP failover. So I have the directory here. And if you ask like where those scripts come from, they actually come with MHA package itself. In samples. And it samples what you have. You have sample configuration. There's your master default configuration file and your node configuration file. Let's take a look at the node configuration file. See, it lists and gets a sample file for you. And it also has sample scripts. And in sample scripts, you have master IP failover. That's a script that relocates your virtual IP, master IP online change. What's the difference between two of those is this is a failover script and this is a switchover script. And there you also have a power manager script that basically, it's optional, you don't have to use it, but what it does, in case of failover, it also shut down your master database, primary master database that failed, so it wants preventing it from a split brain configuration. And you have the send report script that will email you the report what happened and so forth. The good thing is that this entire MHA configuration is very easy to configure with Nagios monitoring. So you can configure this entire thing and have Nagios watch your entire configuration and report to you when the switch actually happened. So overall, I was really happy with it. You know, with some minor configuration issues and things like that, so it was a pretty good tool. And I'm really happy with it. It works okay. One of the drawbacks that I noticed with this configuration is that the entire cluster is managed by a single MHA node. And let's take a look at that quickly. Like I mentioned, you have the single MHA node right here that manages this entire configuration. Now what happens if you, for some reason, lose your MHA node? Of course, nothing will happen. You will not be able, you'll lose the capability for automated failover. So if your MHA node shut down for some reason or MHA manager is not running, your configuration will not be monitored. So I kind of consider MHA manager node itself is being a single point of failure. So you have to assure somehow that your MHA manager is always running, and that's easily done by using Nagios to monitor. But it does have a single point of failure, the MHA node itself. So the node is gone, you cannot perform the switchover, and of course failover is not going to happen. That is actually very different from Continuent Tungsten. Continuent Tungsten in turn uses group communication protocol, so you don't have a single node that is going to fail and disable your entire configuration. In our case, it's MHA management node. But it's open source licensing, like I mentioned. It's a pretty good tool. It's not very difficult to configure. So in conclusion, thank you for watching the video. That's Alex Alexandru again. I'm the CEO of Accelerationdb. I'm planning to release a series of other videos, not only focused on MHA, but more in details, how do you configure MHA and so forth. Also a series of videos on Continuent Tungsten, which is practically does the same as MHA, but it's a lot more advanced. It does the role transitioning similar to MHA, but it's a lot more advanced tool. And like I mentioned, that MHA has a single point of failure here, such as MHA manager node. Tungsten is using actually group configuration protocol, but this is be subject on a separate conversation. So once again, about our company, Accelerationdb, that's what we specialize in. Two main aspects that we are focused on is MySQL performance and MySQL high availability. We also do provide the training, like I mentioned, so if you like to receive the training on how to use MySQL MHA, we provide very interesting training course and can walk you through this. And we can also help your company to configure MHA for your own use, or any of those high availability tools such as MySQL Cluster or MySQL Tungsten. And thank you again.